Today's review is of the Canon EOS M. This is Canon's first ever entry into the fast-growing mirrorless camera market. While the EOS M might be similar to several other mirrorless cameras on the market, there are two features that make it stand out. It has the same 18 megapixel APS-C sensor and DIGIC 5 processor that you'd find in its larger DSLR cousins. And what this means for the consumer, at least on paper, is DSLR quality images and video in a much smaller form factor. The biggest selling point of the EOS M is its compactness. And you can actually see how compact it is when compared to a regular sized point and shoot. It is also approximately half the weight of a regular sized Canon DSLR such as the Canon T5i. Let's take a look at the camera body itself. On the top right hand corner is your autofocus assist beam. You also have an IR sensor, so you can use a Canon standard remote to control this camera. You have the lens lock release button, and behind this cover you have the sensor. Now there's no mirror because this is not a DSLR, so you need to be really careful about handling the sensor. To the left you have the hand grip and the Canon logo. On the left hand side you have the all new proprietary strap mount, so you can't really use your old DSLR straps with this camera. On the top left you have the left and right stereo speakers. You also have a hot shoe, which is essential because this camera does not have a built-in flash. You also have the on-off button and the on-off indicator light. You also have your mode dial to switch between intelligent auto, picture taking mode, and your movie mode. You also have your shutter button up here. A notable feature that you'll really miss if you're coming from a camcorder or a DSLR is the lack of a rotating LCD screen, and this feature is usually very helpful when shooting outdoors. So what you have instead then is a fixed 3-inch LCD screen. You also have a record button, the dedicated record button on the top right hand corner. You have a menu button, a playback button, you have a selector dial, and a couple of other buttons. You also have an info button, which is really helpful to get information on what you're shooting or what you're playing back. On the bottom of your camera is your regular 1/4 inch 20 tripod mount. You also have your card and battery compartment, which opens by sliding it across, and here you'll find the card and the battery itself. On the left hand side, behind this little door, you'll find 3 very essential ports. The first one is the mic port, and this is a neat little feature that allows you to connect an external microphone to the camera when recording video. You also have an HDMI out port that allows you to connect the camera to an HDTV or monitor so you can monitor what you're recording. You also have an AV out digital port if you should need it. Due to the size of this camera, Canon invented an all-new EF lens mount system, and there are 2 lenses currently available for this lens mount. However, you can also use a proprietary Canon lens mount adapter to use all your EFS lenses with this camera. One thing that we did note about the EFM lenses is that the focus ring and the zoom ring are far smoother and more refined than your regular EFS lenses. Mounting a lens to the EOS M is pretty similar to a DSLR. All you need to do is make sure you match the index marks on both the lens and the camera body, and then push in gently and rotate clockwise till you hear that click, and now the lens is secure. Like its bigger DSLR cousins, the EOS M is solidly built. It has an all-metal chassis and the fit and finish quality is excellent. The touchscreen on the EOS M is extremely responsive, and this is very essential because a lot of the features and settings on this camera can only be controlled via the touchscreen. The menu on the M is also very well laid out and is almost identical to that on most Canon DSLRs. When it comes to output formats, the EOS M gives you just as many choices as a regular Canon DSLR. For example, you can select the 18 megapixel JPEG format, a couple of smaller JPEG formats, RAW, or you could output both RAW and 18 megapixel JPEG simultaneously. When it comes to video, you can shoot in 1080p Full HD at 30 frames per second or 1080p at 24 frames per second, which happens to be the cinematic frame rate. You can also shoot at 720p HD at 60 frames per second for fast moving objects. You can also shoot in standard definition at 480p. In manual mode, all your adjustments to shutter speed, aperture, and ISO must be made through the touchscreen interface, as there are no physical buttons. Here are a few test pictures that we took with the EOS M. All these pictures were taken in the RAW format, and we've given you the settings at which these pictures were taken so you can get an idea of how the camera was set up. Our first picture was taken outdoors at around 5 p.m. and as you can see, the image is really crisp and there's lots of detail that the camera captures. Our next two shots were close-up shots that were taken at lower f-stop values, and you can actually see the richness of the color from this camera and how the camera handles depth of field. Now this picture was taken around 9 p.m. and the street was only lit by basic street lighting, some of which you can see, and the street was otherwise pretty dark. Now the camera produced a very usable image, though there was a little bit of noise which you can see in the sky. Now here we compared it to a DSLR, in this case the T5i, and we took the same exact image with the same exact lighting conditions, which is studio lighting, and set both cameras to the exact same settings. The image on the left is from the T5i and the image on the right is from the EOS M, and there's very little difference in these two images. So here's some outdoor video footage we took, and as you can see, the images are really crisp, but the autofocus is a little bit slow. And here's some footage that was taken at night with some basic street lighting, and as you can see, the video is a bit noisy, and the same problem with autofocus can be seen here again. However, the low light performance is very similar to what you'd get from a similarly priced DSLR. One thing that is disappointing about this camera is the grip, or rather the lack of it. The front grip on the camera is really small, and Canon ought to have done a better job at designing this grip. The M's battery is noticeably smaller than other Canon DSLR batteries, and since the M has the same sensor and processor as some of its larger cousins, the battery doesn't last as long as the batteries on those cameras. So if you plan to shoot for extended periods of time with the M, it's advised that you get yourself an extra battery. So overall, the EOS M is a solidly built camera that takes excellent pictures and video, but has some shortcomings when compared to a DSLR. So is the EOS M a good DSLR alternative? The answer is yes, if you're willing to live with some of its shortcomings and pay a price that is substantially lower than a comparable DSLR. The link to the EOS M is in the description below. If you found this review useful, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Thank you very much for watching.